Young woman marries a 78-year-old man, desiring his $1 million inheritance. But when she reads the will in front of everyone, she is shocked by the consequences of her actions. Gerald observed the empty mansion around him. At 78 years old, the vastness of the house seemed even greater with the absence of his beloved wife, Agnes. The memories of their days together filled every corner. The framed photos on the wall, the old piano Agnes loved to play, and even the garden she tended with such care. But now, silence reigned supreme. Widowed and retired, Gerald spent his days in a busy neighborhood of the city where life around him continued its frenetic pace while he lived at a much slower rhythm. The laughter and conversations of the neighbors contrasted with the quietness of his home, further increasing his sense of loneliness. Daisy, his neighbor, was a ray of sunshine in his life. At 50 years old, she was a dedicated and kind-hearted woman, always willing to help Gerald. Daisy took care of his meals, washed his clothes, and most importantly, kept him company. Her visits were always a relief for Gerald, who eagerly awaited their trivial conversations and the human warmth that Daisy brought. It was her idea for Gerald to hire a caregiver to help with household activities. Daisy often saw Gerald struggling to perform simple tasks, and her heart ached to see her friend in such a state. One day, after a fall in the bathroom that nearly resulted in a fracture, Gerald realized it was time to follow Daisy's advice. His movements were increasingly impaired by age, and simple tasks had become real challenges. The fall was a moment of epiphany for Gerald. He lay on the cold floor, feeling vulnerable and powerless. It was clear that he couldn't continue like this. He contacted a caregiver agency, seeking someone who could provide the necessary assistance. The decision to seek professional help was not easy. It involved admitting to himself that he was no longer the strong and independent man he used to be. After a few days of waiting, the agency sent Amanda, a 25-year-old young woman. When Amanda first entered Gerald's house, her smile lit up the environment. She was charming and friendly, with a smile that conveyed kindness and care. Her eyes sparkled with a mix of enthusiasm and empathy, and her presence immediately brought a sense of comfort. From the first day, she proved to be dedicated and helpful, assisting Gerald in all his daily needs. She prepared his meals with care, always asking about his preferences and trying to recreate some of the dishes Agnes used to make. Amanda also took charge of cleaning, keeping the house impeccable and cozy. She helped Gerald get up, dress, and even walk through the garden, activities that used to be simple but now required great effort. Over time, her presence in the house brought new hope to Gerald's life. The mornings were no longer lonely, now filled with Amanda's company and lively conversations. She talked about her youth, her hopes and dreams, and gradually Gerald began to open up more as well. A sincere friendship began to form between the two. Gerald appreciated Amanda's energy and joy, while she found in Gerald a source of wisdom and stories of a well-lived life. They spent hours talking about various subjects, from books and movies to the changes Gerald had seen in the city over the years. Each day with Amanda made Gerald feel less like a man in the final phase of his life and more like someone with new reasons to smile and enjoy the present. Amanda was genuinely interested in Gerald's stories. He told her how he started his business in the car sales industry, facing difficulties and achieving success. Amanda listened attentively, admiring the determination and courage he had throughout his career. This exchange of stories created an increasingly strong bond between them. Gerald began to see Amanda not just as a caregiver, but as a friend who was there to listen to him and share significant moments. Over time, Amanda began to accompany Gerald to his medical appointments and weekly physiotherapy sessions. These outings became special moments where their complicity was even more evident. Gerald, who used to see these doctor visits as a burden, now faced them with more ease, knowing he had someone by his side who genuinely cared about his well-being. During their walks to the doctor's office, they discussed various topics, from climate change to neighborhood news, further strengthening their friendship. The weekly visit to the church was one of the moments Gerald appreciated the most. He always felt a special peace in that place, and with Amanda by his side, these moments became even more significant. Amanda, although not a regular churchgoer, deeply respected Gerald's faith and accompanied him with devotion. During the masses, she helped Gerald get settled and stayed by his side, participating in the hymns and prayers. After the Mass, they would usually sit on the benches in the square next to the church, talking about the homily and reflecting on life. In these walks and visits, Amanda became an attentive observer of Gerald's needs. She adjusted her pace to his, offered support at the right moments, and respected his silences when he preferred to just contemplate the environment around him. Gerald, in turn, began to trust Amanda more and more, sharing thoughts and feelings he kept deep inside. The friendship that blossomed between Gerald and Amanda brought new energy to the elderly man's life. The days were no longer marked by boredom and loneliness, but by lively conversations, laughter, and moments of companionship. Gerald felt more alive and motivated, finding in Amanda a reason to look forward to each new day with hope and joy. As the months passed, the shared routine between Gerald and Amanda became firmly established. The young caregiver not only performed her tasks efficiently, but also became an indispensable figure in Gerald's life. Amanda's presence brought a freshness to the house, and the friendship they developed proved to be a balm for Gerald's soul, transforming his daily life into something lighter and more meaningful. The routine in Gerald's house continued to establish itself harmoniously. Each day brought new conversations and moments of sharing between him and Amanda. One day, at the end of a sunny afternoon while sitting on the porch, Gerald decided to share a part of his life that he rarely mentioned, the story of his late wife, Agnes. With a distant look, Gerald began to speak about Agnes. "I met Agnes in a restaurant when we were young," he started, a nostalgic smile appearing on his lips. "She was a beautiful waitress, and I was just starting my ventures in the automotive industry. When I saw her, it was love at first sight. Her blue eyes mesmerized me, and that night I had to talk to her." He paused, taking a deep breath, as if feeling the weight of the memories. "We arranged to go out, and after only 3 months, I proposed to her. She accepted, and it was the best decision of my life." Amanda listened attentively, not interrupting. She could see the depth of Gerald's love for Agnes in every word he said. "We had many happy years together, but we also faced great challenges," Gerald continued. "We tried for years to have a child, but we discovered that Agnes had a health problem and couldn't get pregnant. It was one of the saddest days of my life. My greatest dream was to be a father, but I knew at that moment that this dream would never come true with Agnes." Gerald paused again, this time longer, his eyes filled with tears. "Agnes, knowing my dream, told me she would understand if I wanted to separate from her. But I couldn't do that. I loved her too much. I promised to love and respect her until the end of my days, and such news wouldn't change that." He looked at Amanda, the sadness visible on his face. "Agnes was the love of my life, and nothing, not even the impossibility of having children, could shake our relationship." Amanda, touched by Gerald's story, felt a deep empathy for him. She then decided to share a bit of her own story. "Gerald, I understand a little of your pain," she began, her voice soft. "I come from a poor family and have been caring for my grandmother since I was 14. She passed away when I was 20, but taught me a lot about love and dedication. I have a younger brother, Enzo, who is wheelchair-bound. As a child, he developed a problem with his legs and ended up in a wheelchair. The surgery he needs to walk again is very expensive, and that's why I work so hard. I want to save money to afford that surgery for him." Gerald listened attentively, admiring Amanda's resilience and dedication. "You are an amazing young woman, Amanda," he said, a tone of admiration in his voice. "Your brother is very lucky to have someone like you by his side." As the days passed, Gerald noticed that Amanda was becoming emotionally closer to him. Their conversations became more personal, and she began to show affection and attention that went beyond the professional. She was genuinely interested in his stories, laughed at his jokes, and cared deeply about his well-being. During their trips to church and medical visits, Amanda began to hold Gerald's arm more affectionately, and their gazes often conveyed a growing affection. Gerald, who initially saw Amanda only as a caregiver and friend, began to notice these changes. Although he felt flattered and appreciated the extra care, he also felt some hesitation. The memory of Agnes was still very much alive in his heart, and he wasn't sure how to deal with the complex feelings that were starting to arise. One night, after an especially pleasant dinner that Amanda prepared, she sat next to Gerald on the sofa, a bit closer than usual. "Gerald," she said softly, "I have been thinking a lot about our conversations and how much we have in common. I feel that you understand my life and my struggles, and I admire your strength and your heart." She paused, looking deeply into Gerald's eyes. "I want to be here for you, not just as a caregiver, but as someone who truly cares." Gerald felt his heart race. He knew Amanda was special and that their bond was strengthening. However, the shadow of Agnes hovered over him, and he didn't know how to respond to this new dynamic. He smiled gently at Amanda, thanking her with his eyes, but maintaining a certain emotional distance, trying to process everything that was happening. Thus, the night unfolded with a mix of emotions. Gerald, torn between the memory of his great love and the possibility of new affection, and Amanda, determined to get closer to Gerald, making it clear that her feelings went beyond the professional. The days continued to pass at Gerald's house, and Amanda's presence became increasingly essential. The routine they established brought comfort and stability to Gerald, but not everyone was convinced of Amanda's intentions. Daisy, always attentive and protective, began to notice signs that made her uneasy. Daisy observed how Amanda seemed to be getting too close to Gerald in a way that went beyond her professional responsibilities. She noticed how Amanda's gestures became more affectionate and how their conversations became increasingly intimate. Although Gerald appreciated the company, Daisy couldn't shake the feeling that Amanda might have other interests beyond just caring for Gerald. One afternoon, while helping Gerald organize some things in the living room, Daisy decided to express her concerns. "Gerald, you know how much I care about you," she began with a serious but affectionate tone. "I've noticed how Amanda has been getting closer to you. I don't want to seem distrustful, but I think you should be cautious." Gerald looked at Daisy, surprised by her words. "What do you mean by that, Daisy? Amanda has been a blessing to me. She takes care of me with so much affection." Daisy sighed, choosing her words carefully. "I know, Gerald, but sometimes people are not what they seem. I just want you to be safe and not get hurt." Gerald, although touched by Daisy's concern, decided to trust his own judgment. "I appreciate your concern, Daisy, but I think you're worrying unnecessarily. Amanda is a good person, and I'm sure her intentions are sincere." Despite the conversation, Daisy couldn't ignore her instinct and continued to keep a close eye on Amanda. Meanwhile, Gerald and Amanda continued to strengthen their bonds. One quiet night, sitting on the porch after dinner, Gerald and Amanda began a deep conversation about life and the dreams they both had. The night was calm, and the stars shone in the sky, creating a perfect environment for confidences. "Gerald, "What did you dream of doing the most when you were young?" asked Amanda with genuine curiosity. Gerald smiled, looking at the starry sky. "I dreamed of building a great business, and I did. But my greatest dream was always to have a big family full of children and grandchildren. Agnes and I tried for many years, but unfortunately we couldn't fulfill that dream." Amanda, feeling Gerald's vulnerability, encouraged him to continue. "You and Agnes couldn't have children. It must have been very difficult for you." Gerald nodded, his eyes filling with tears. "Yes, it was very difficult. Agnes had a health problem that prevented her from getting pregnant. When we found out, it was one of the saddest days of our lives. We considered adoption, but Agnes felt a deep pain thinking about a child that couldn't truly be hers. I decided not to force the situation and respected her feelings. Our love was stronger than any obstacle." Amanda held Gerald's hand, offering comfort. "You were very brave and dedicated, Gerald. It's admirable how you put love above everything else." Gerald smiled, appreciating Amanda's support. "Life is full of sacrifices, Amanda, and what really matters is how we handle them." As the nights passed, Amanda continued to open up more to Gerald. She talked about her hopes of providing a better life for her brother Enzo and the sacrifices she made over the years. These conversations created an even stronger emotional bond between the two. However, Daisy remained vigilant. She observed how Amanda was getting closer and closer to Gerald, and her suspicions did not diminish. One night, Daisy saw Amanda sitting very close to Gerald, with a look she couldn't define as purely professional. Daisy's protective instinct intensified, but she knew she needed more than just her suspicions to confront Gerald again. As the weeks passed, the interactions between Gerald and Amanda became more intimate. Amanda began to express her own dreams in a way that deeply resonated with Gerald. Every day, Gerald felt more connected to her, but the shadow of Daisy's suspicions loomed in the background, creating an atmosphere of silent tension. As the days went by, Amanda began to get closer to Gerald in a way that went beyond her professional responsibilities. One day, while watching a movie in the living room, Amanda leaned in to adjust Gerald's blanket, letting her hand rest a little longer than necessary on his. Gerald felt a slight discomfort, but said nothing. It was a new situation for him, and he didn't know exactly how to react. Amanda began to seek more moments of proximity. She lightly ran her hand over his shoulders while helping him dress or sat very close during meals. Although Gerald appreciated the attention and care, he began to feel that something was different, something that made him slightly uncomfortable. The days continued to pass in Gerald's house, and Amanda's presence became increasingly significant in his life. She was always by his side, helpful and affectionate, filling the house with a new energy. However, on a quiet Sunday afternoon while they were sitting on the porch, Amanda decided to take a step further. "Gerald," Amanda began with a soft and hesitant tone, "I have been thinking a lot about us and how important you are to me. I want to ask you a question, and I hope you can consider it with care." Gerald, surprised by the seriousness in Amanda's tone, looked at her attentively. "What is it, Amanda? What do you want to ask?" Amanda took a deep breath, gently taking Gerald's hand. "I have always dreamed of getting married, walking into a church dressed as a bride, and joining someone I truly love. You know how much I care about you, and I believe that if Agnes were here, she would want to see you happy. I would like to marry you, Gerald. I want to make you happy in the years we have left." Gerald remained silent, processing the unexpected request. He felt a mix of emotions, surprise, confusion, and a deep loneliness that seemed to find an answer in Amanda's emotional appeal. The vulnerability he felt in those days, aggravated by Agnes's absence, made him more susceptible to Amanda's emotional plea. Amanda, sensing Gerald's hesitation, continued to gently press. I know it seems sudden, but think about the companionship we will have with each other. Agnes certainly wouldn't want to see you lonely. We can create new, happy moments together, like a family." Gerald was still thoughtful when Amanda added, her voice slightly choked, "Gerald, there's something else I need to share with you. In the past, I had a relationship. We got married, and I was so happy. But after a year, when I couldn't get pregnant, my ex-husband took a test. We found out he had no problems, so it was my turn to take the test. It was then that I discovered I couldn't have children. My ex-husband abandoned me, discarded me as if I had no value anymore. It was a very difficult time for me." Gerald felt a wave of empathy as he heard Amanda's story. He could see the pain in her eyes, a pain that resonated with the experience he had with Agnes. "Amanda, I'm sorry you went through that," he said sincerely. "You don't deserve to be treated like that." Amanda held Gerald's hand more firmly. "Thank you, Gerald. I believe you understand my pain like no one else. I just want a chance to be happy again, and I feel we can find that happiness together." Amanda's marriage proposal began to take over Gerald's thoughts. He spent hours reflecting on what she had said, pondering his loneliness and the promise of new companionship. The idea of remarrying, of not spending the last years of his life alone, began to seem attractive. When Daisy found out about Amanda's proposal, she was incredulous and worried. She immediately went to talk to Gerald, determined to protect him from a hasty decision. "Gerald, this is madness. You barely know Amanda, and you're already considering marrying her. You need to think clearly." Gerald, already swayed by Amanda's proposal, replied firmly, "Daisy, I know you're worried, but Amanda has been a blessing to me. She cares about me, and I don't want to spend my days alone. Maybe it's time to move on." Daisy, feeling the urgency of the situation, tried once more. "Gerald, you're vulnerable right now. Please don't make such an important decision without considering all the implications. I'm afraid you might get hurt." But Daisy's words couldn't change Gerald's determination. He was convinced that Amanda's proposal could be the solution to his loneliness. And so, determined to follow his heart, Gerald began planning the wedding with Amanda, believing that this new union could bring the happiness he so desired. With a heavy heart, Daisy watched the situation unfold, fearing for her dear friend's well-being, while Gerald embraced the hope of a new beginning with Amanda. The days following Gerald's decision to marry Amanda were marked by an unexpected rush. The young caregiver, determined to fulfill her dream, sped up all the preparations so that the wedding could happen as quickly as possible. Gerald, although still a bit dazed by the speed of the events, allowed himself to be carried away by Amanda's enthusiasm. Amanda took care of all the details with surprising efficiency. Within a few days, she had provided the rings, a simple yet elegant wedding dress, and organized a small ceremony at the church Gerald attended. Everything was happening at a frenetic pace, but Amanda seemed determined not to let anything slip. Daisy, upon learning about the preparations, felt deeply hurt. She tried to approach Gerald several times to talk, and perhaps convince him to reconsider, but was kept at a distance by Amanda. The young caregiver was committed to keeping Daisy out of any decisions or events related to the wedding. Gerald, influenced by Amanda's constant presence and the desire not to be alone anymore, ended up giving in and excluding Daisy from the event, something he never thought he would do. The wedding day arrived quickly. The church was decorated simply, with white flowers and candles softly illuminating the environment. Amanda walked into the church dressed as a bride, with a radiant smile that hid any trace of nervousness. Gerald awaited her at the altar, feeling a mix of emotions, anxiety, hope, and a slight touch of sadness for Daisy's absence. The ceremony was short and intimate, attended only by a few close friends of Amanda and some of Gerald's acquaintances from the church. The priest, who had known Gerald for years, conducted the ceremony with words of encouragement and blessings, wishing the couple happiness and love. When they reached the moment of exchanging rings, Gerald looked into Amanda's eyes and repeated the vows with sincerity. "I, Gerald, take you, Amanda, as my wife. I promise to love and respect you in sickness and in health, in joy and in sorrow, all the days of our lives." Amanda, with tears of emotion in her eyes, repeated the vows. "I, Amanda, take you, Gerald, as my husband. I promise to love and respect you in sickness and in health, in joy and in sorrow, all the days of our lives." With the seal of a gentle kiss, the couple was declared husband and wife. The small congregation applauded, and Gerald felt a warmth in his heart that he hadn't experienced in a long time. Although there was a shadow of doubt, he wanted to believe that this marriage could bring the happiness he so desired. After the ceremony, a small lunch was held in the parish hall. The conversations were lively, and Amanda was radiant, circulating among the guests and receiving congratulations. Gerald, though happy, couldn't help but feel the absence of Daisy, his longtime friend, and the guilt for excluding her from that moment. After the wedding, Gerald's house initially seemed filled with a new energy. Amanda, radiant with the realization of her dream, maintained her dedication and affection. However, this honeymoon phase was short-lived. Within weeks, Gerald began to notice subtle but significant changes in Amanda's behavior. She began to be absent frequently, claiming she needed to visit her family or handle personal matters. At first, Gerald didn't mind, believing these outings were normal. However, as the absences became more frequent and prolonged, he began to feel the shadow of loneliness that had accompanied him for so long. The mornings and afternoons that were once filled with Amanda's cheerful presence were now silent and lonely. Gerald spent his days sitting in his favorite armchair, looking out the window and wondering when Amanda would return. He began to realize that the promises of companionship and affection were dissipating, and distrust slowly settled in his heart. One afternoon, while Amanda was away, Gerald received an unexpected visit. The doorbell rang, and when he opened the door, he found a young man in a wheelchair with a shy smile on his face. "Hello, you must be Gerald. I am Enzo, Amanda's brother." Gerald was surprised but greeted him with a warm smile. "Enzo, it's a pleasure to meet you. Amanda has spoken a lot about you. Please, come in." Enzo entered and soon settled in the living room. Gerald felt a sense of relief at having company, even if just for a moment. They began to talk about various things, from Amanda's childhood to Enzo's interests. Gerald discovered that Enzo was a brilliant young man, passionate about technology, and with an admirable perspective on life, despite his physical limitations. "Gerald," said Enzo during a moment of pause, "my sister has always spoken very fondly of you. She wanted me to meet you a long time ago." Gerald smiled, but couldn't help but express a growing concern. "Enzo, I'm glad to meet you. But I've noticed that Amanda has been absent a lot lately. Do you know if everything is all right with her?" Enzo seemed to hesitate for a moment before answering. "Amanda is a very dedicated person, Gerald. Sometimes she carries the weight of the world on her shoulders. But I don't know exactly what's going on now. Maybe you should talk to her directly." The conversation with Enzo brought some comfort, but also reinforced Gerald's need to clarify his doubts. He decided that the next time Amanda was home, they needed to have a serious conversation about her absences and their future together. When Amanda finally returned that night, Gerald was determined to address the issue. "Amanda, we need to talk," he began, trying to stay calm. "I've noticed you've been absent a lot lately. I'm worried and would like to understand what's going on." Amanda seemed surprised, but quickly adopted a soft expression. "Gerald, I'm sorry if my absences have worried you. I have many responsibilities with my family, and sometimes it's hard to balance everything. I promise I'll try to be more present." Despite Amanda's reassuring words, Gerald couldn't help but feel something was wrong. Her promises no longer held the same weight, and the loneliness, once a distant spectre, began to become a constant presence again. And so, with Enzo's arrival and Amanda's frequent absences, Gerald once again found himself confronted with uncertainty and distrust, trying to understand if the new life he hoped to have with Amanda would truly bring the happiness he so desired. Amanda's frequent absences continued to unsettle Gerald. He found himself increasingly alone, and the distrust he had begun to feel grew day by day. Amanda's promises seemed empty, and the loneliness he thought he had left behind returned to haunt him. One morning, Gerald woke up slowly, hearing muffled voices on the other side of the wall. He recognized Amanda's voice, who seemed to be on the phone in the next room. Driven by curiosity and concern, he stayed silent, trying to catch the content of the conversation. "Yes, I'm pregnant, Matthew," he heard Amanda say, her voice filled with nervousness. "Of course it's yours. I have no relationship with Gerald, but he can't find out. I'll have to find a way to disappear and take his inheritance soon." Gerald's world collapsed. The truth hit like a devastating blow. Amanda had lied about her inability to get pregnant and was planning to steal his inheritance. The young woman he had welcomed with such affection was only interested in his fortune. With a broken heart and a mind racing with thoughts, Gerald knew he needed to act quickly. He waited for Amanda to leave the house as she had been doing in recent weeks and called Daisy immediately. When she arrived, he greeted her with a sad but determined look. "Daisy, I made a big mistake," said Gerald, his voice choked. "You were right about Amanda. I heard her talking on the phone, planning to steal my inheritance. I let myself be deceived, and I was a fool not to listen to you." Daisy, seeing Gerald's state, felt a mix of sadness and relief. "Gerald, I'm sorry this happened, but there's still time to fix things." Gerald nodded, already with a plan in mind. "I need to change my will, Daisy. Amanda will have a surprise when she reads the will. I need to ensure that my inheritance goes to those who truly matter." Daisy readily agreed to help. Together, they went to Gerald's lawyer's office, where he explained the entire situation and requested to rewrite his will. Gerald detailed his new provisions, ensuring that his fortune would be distributed in a fair and meaningful way. After completing the changes to the will, Gerald felt somewhat relieved, although the pain of betrayal still weighed on his heart. "Daisy, I owe you apologies and thanks. You have always been by my side, and I didn't know how to listen to you. Thank you for helping me fix this mistake." Daisy held Gerald's hand, offering a comforting smile. "Gerald, you are a good man. I'm glad you made the right decision. Let's make sure the rest of your days are peaceful and just." The days after discovering Amanda's betrayal were hard for Gerald. The pain of disappointment and the sense of vulnerability deeply affected his spirit and, consequently, his health. Stress and sadness began to take their toll. Gerald felt increasingly weak and tired, as if his vital energy was slowly draining from his body. Small daily tasks that he could previously perform with minimal effort became real challenges. Daisy, always by his side, noticed the worsening of his condition and did everything possible to comfort him. "Gerald, we need to go to the doctor. Your health is getting worse," she said, worried. Gerald nodded, feeling the weight of reality. "Yes, Daisy. I think it's time to take care of myself." With a heavy heart, Gerald faced not only the betrayal and loneliness, but now also the growing fragility of his health, determined to settle accounts before it was too late. 2 weeks after the devastating discovery about Amanda, Gerald's health deteriorated rapidly. He spent his last days in a state of deep reflection and sadness, feeling the weight of betrayal and loneliness. Daisy remained by his side, offering all the comfort and support she could. On a quiet morning, Gerald took his last breath. The news of his death brought a wave of sadness to the small circle that knew him, especially Daisy, who took charge of organizing the funeral. She wanted to ensure that Gerald was remembered with dignity and respect. The funeral was a simple but emotionally charged event. Close friends, some neighbors, and church members attended to pay their last respects. Daisy, with a heavy heart, took care of all the details, from the flowers to the words spoken during the ceremony. Every aspect of the funeral reflected the respect and affection she had for Gerald. Amanda, on the other hand, began to show signs of anxiety. During the funeral, she maintained a controlled demeanor, but it was evident that her mind was elsewhere, on Gerald's will. She knew that with his death, the reading of the will was imminent, and the uncertainty about what was to come left her uneasy. After the funeral, as the last visitors said their goodbyes, Daisy looked at Gerald's empty house, feeling the palpable absence of her dear friend. She knew there were still matters to be resolved, but for now, her focus was on ensuring Gerald's memory was honored and his last will respected. Days after Gerald's funeral, the atmosphere in the mansion was heavy with anticipation and tension. Amanda, despite her attempts to maintain composure, was visibly anxious. She awaited the arrival of the lawyer with a mixture of confidence and impatience, firmly believing that inheriting Gerald's entire fortune was just a formality. The lawyer, a middle-aged man with a serene and professional demeanor, arrived at the mansion punctually. He greeted Daisy and Amanda and settled in the living room, where he awaited them for the reading of the will. "Thank you for being here," the lawyer began, adjusting his glasses and taking the document from his briefcase. "Gerald left clear instructions on how he wanted his assets to be distributed. I will proceed with the reading now." Amanda sat up straight with a contained smile, while Daisy watched with a mixture of sadness and curiosity. Gerald wanted his inheritance to be distributed in a way that would benefit those who truly mattered to him, the lawyer continued. "First, 50% of his fortune will be donated to a nursing home to ensure that the residents receive adequate care and dignity in their lives." Amanda became visibly tense, the smile disappearing from her lips. Daisy, on the other hand, felt a mix of relief and pride in Gerald's generosity. "The next item," said the lawyer, "is that 30% of Gerald's fortune, along with the house he lived in, will be transferred to Daisy. Gerald left a message expressing his gratitude for all the support and friendship you offered him over the years." Daisy was surprised, her eyes filled with tears of gratitude and sadness. Amanda began to fidget in her chair, her anxiety turning into apprehension. "The remainder," the lawyer continued, 10% of Gerald's fortune will be allocated to Enzo, Amanda's brother, so that he can undergo the surgery he needs and have a chance to start a new life." Amanda was pale, the confidence she had before replaced by silent shock. She knew there was still a part of the will to be read, but what would be left for her? "Finally," the lawyer said, looking directly at Amanda, "Gerald left you a key to a safe in the mansion. Inside this safe, you will find a letter written by Gerald explaining his decisions." Amanda took the key with trembling hands. The lawyer closed the will and stood up. "This concludes the reading of the will. If there are any questions or further assistance needed, I will be available." As the lawyer left, leaving the mansion in silence, Amanda remained seated, holding the key to the safe with trembling fingers. The revelation of Gerald's will had shattered her expectations, leaving her in a state of shock and disbelief. Finally, gathering courage, Amanda stood up and went to the safe in Gerald's office. With the key in hand, she opened the heavy metal door and found a single letter inside. Taking a deep breath, she began to read the words written by Gerald. "Dear Amanda, if you are reading this, it means I am no longer here. First and foremost, I want to thank you for the moments we shared and for the care you provided. However, I also know the truth about your intentions. I overheard your conversation with Matthias and understood that your plan was to take advantage of me and my inheritance. Despite this, I choose not to hold a grudge. The money I left for your son is a way that he has a better future, regardless of the circumstances in which he was conceived. I want him to know that despite everything, there is always a chance to start over and do good. The money will be available to your son only when he reaches adulthood. Along with the inheritance, he will receive this letter and another one I will leave for him, telling the whole truth about what happened between us. I hope he can learn from our mistakes and choices and follow a more just and honest path. I hope this experience teaches you something valuable about honesty, integrity, and the true value of the people around you. I wish you find a more just and honest path to move forward. Sincerely, Gerald." As she read the letter, tears began to roll down Amanda's face. Gerald's message, even after his death, was one of generosity and compassion that she did not deserve, but that deeply touched her heart. Guilt and regret overwhelmed her, leaving her to reflect on her actions and the consequences she now faced. Daisy, in turn, received the inheritance with a mix of sadness and gratitude. She knew how much Gerald had suffered in his last moments, but also knew he had taken the right steps to protect his legacy and ensure his will was respected. With the resources she now had, Daisy planned to continue helping others, honoring the memory of her dear friend. Enzo, Amanda's brother, was informed about the inheritance left to him. When Daisy and the lawyer explained the situation, Enzo was deeply moved. Gerald's generosity meant he would finally have the chance to undergo the surgery he needed and pursue his dreams. He promised to honor the gift he received, dedicating himself to a life of purpose and gratitude. The reading of the letter had a profound impact on Amanda. She found herself confronted with the need to reassess her choices and seek a path to redemption. Gerald, with his final message, had planted the seed of a transformation she could not ignore. Gerald's actions left a lasting impact on the lives of all he touched. Daisy and Enzo moved forward with their lives, each honoring Gerald's memory in meaningful ways. Daisy, using part of the inheritance, decided to found the Gerald Williams Institution to help the elderly, providing them with care and dignity, just as Gerald always wished. The institution quickly became a refuge for many, offering not only physical support, but also emotional and social support, reflecting the generosity and compassion that Gerald exemplified in life. Enzo, after undergoing the long-awaited surgery, began a new life with possibilities that once seemed unattainable. He dedicated himself to studies and work, always remembering the man who gave him a second chance, and promising to make the most of every opportunity. Amanda, on the other hand, faced the harsh consequences of her actions. The revelation of the truth and Gerald's final message left her in a state of deep reflection. Over time, guilt and regret began to transform her heart. She understood that she needed to change and seek a more honest and integral path. The inheritance destined for her brother, conditional on his adulthood and accompanied by the truth about the past, became a constant reminder of the forgiveness and second chance Gerald had offered her. Gerald's legacy went far beyond the material. His final actions, marked by compassion and justice, taught valuable lessons about love, integrity, and the importance of doing good. His generous spirit and wisdom continued to inspire those who remained, ensuring that his memory lived on through acts of kindness and justice perpetuated by the Gerald Williams Institution, by Enzo, and even by Amanda in her path to redemption. I hope you enjoyed today's story. If you did, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more stories like this. Leave a like and comment below what you thought about the story. See you.